restore the Arab world's fear of us.
Okay, if I could take a question from that.
What role do you think the new American president will play in the future of
there are two factors. One is Barack Obama himself, he's pretty much a complete opportunist, and he's a Clinton clone. That's why most of the administration are just holdovers from Clinton era, some of them being from the Bush era, but the majority being Clinton people. So you can't expect anything new from the administration. And all the statements that he's made thus far indicate that he's going to resume U.S. standard policy. I don't have time to go through all the statements, but you know yourselves, his first day in his office, what was the first thing he did? He calls up, makes a phone call to our three main allies in the Arab world, and who are the three people who he calls, and then he praises them the second day in office in the State Department. The first person he calls is Hosni Mubarak, the most despised leader in the Arab world. The second person he calls is King Abdullah of Jordan, the most ridiculous leader in the Arab world. And the third person he calls is Mahmoud Abbas, the only living corpse in the Arab world. So you can't really expect anything from him as a personality. But then there's a separate issue. And the separate issue is, might circumstances compel him, Obama, to revisit U.S. policy? And there, obviously, circumstances are very different than they were during the Clinton era. The Clinton era, there was great prosperity in the economy. It was also the era of American triumphalism right after the end of, or the implosion of the Soviet bloc. Now the picture is very different. The economy is in disastrous straits, and the U.S. suffered a major defeat in Iraq and doesn't have a military option against Iran. It's a very different scene than it was in the Clinton era. And so circumstances might, we can't say for sure, might compel Barack Obama to modify, at any rate, U.S. policy. But so far there are no signs of it. The only distinction I would make is it has nothing to do with him as a personality. He's completely wretched. But it does, there are possibilities because circumstances are different.
If I could take a question from
I'm not abusing my position. But, thank you, President Finkelstein, for your fascinating talk. I want you to just elaborate on the point you made earlier about public opinion. Now, that's one of the most defining characteristics of the war in Gaza. Certainly something that set it apart from the 2006 and 2011 invasion was the complete media blackout, which was now upheld in the Gaza Strip, which led to our only real coverage of it coming from a few brave journalists who were already stationed there. And my question to you is, had the war been covered in its entirety from the beginning, would it have continued for as long as it did?
No, probably wouldn't have. But we have that part, I would concede, I would grant. But we have to bear in mind that Israel prepared at least 6 months, as they boasted, not only militarily for the attack, but they prepared 6 months in terms of their propaganda for the attack. And the first few days, it seemed to be going swimmingly. They were very proud of themselves, and I don't watch television, but I understand that their spokespersons this time around were all women, and they purposely did that because they said the female generals who send a softer image, they had everything they thought under control. But the fact of the matter is, it was like a week into the massacre, and their whole propaganda edifice began rapidly to collapse. And Israel confronted a huge public relations disaster as the result of the massacre it committed. People found out they were able to find out what was happening, probably in no small part through the web. And Israel's, public relations image now is a complete, total disaster. You look at the last BBC poll, world poll, of 21 nations, Israel ranks at the bottom. It always ranks at the bottom, but this time it ranked at the bottom with Pakistan and Iran for negative ratings. But the important point is, compare the mainstream coverage of Iran and Pakistan and Israel. You can understand from mainstream coverage why Iran and Pakistan are at the bottom. But mainstream coverage can't explain why Israel is at the bottom, because the mainstream coverage is overwhelmingly favorable to Israel. It's because people have found new ways of learning the truth. And it doesn't work anymore. Of the 21 countries surveyed, Israel got more negatives than positives from every country except two, the United States and Russia. In those terms, it had the worst record in the BBC poll. And if you look at the other polls, tons of polls, or many polls are taken, they had a poll of 36 countries. Which is the country you would least want to visit on a vacation? Israel is always number 36. We want to go there with a barge pole, not Israel. Where's the country where people are most obnoxious to tourists? Number 1, Israel. In every poll, it's a complete disaster. And now the obvious question then becomes, well, that's strange. If what I'm saying is true, and how do you account for the conduct and the behavior of the European governments? Because they're completely out of sync with popular opinion. And that's true. There is a chasm opening up between popular opinion on Israel and government conduct. And a German friend of mine, a former co-author, she wrote me the other day, she said, a real problem is developing here. She's speaking as a German. She says, Germans are not happy with the way Israel carries on. Well, of course, Germany is a pretty civilized place, and these Israelis are completely bonkers. And she said, a real problem is opening up because, Angela Merkel, she still thinks she's fighting World War II. And she's the last member of the anti-Nazi resistance. She's a complete lunatic. And she goes to Jerusalem, gets all of these prizes, says, I'm fighting Nazism, I'm remembering the Holocaust. All right, calm down, lady, it's over. And my friend wrote, and she said, a problem is going to develop because when you have this huge chasm opening up, people are going to start whispering, well, who is controlling our foreign policy? And then there will be real problems with a resurgence of anti-Semitism. So far it's completely bogus. Jonathan Friedland worrying about anti-Semitism. Oh, come on. There's no problem with anti-Semitism. There's a problem with a lunatic state that's out of hand, out of control. But a problem can develop now, because a huge gap is opened up between popular opinion and the conduct of governments, and people will begin to whisper, well, maybe there is something to these Jews controlling the world. And that's a bad thing. And it's a real problem. And it's all the more reason that those who are concerned about problems of anti-Semitism, which, as I say, in my opinion, are currently non-existent in the West, but it could happen, should hope that the governments begin to act in a civilized, moral way and hold Israel to the same standard as it ought to hold every other country in the world.